Masechet Horayot Daf Rima Amud Bet, second wide line by the Mishnah. Uru Beddin ruled to say something was mutar. Via the Ushet Ha'ova Hazr, when they realized they made a mistake and they retracted. Ben Shehevi'u Kaparatan, whether they already brought their korban as an atonement. Uben Shelo Hevi'u Kaparatan, or they didn't bring it yet. Va'alach Va'asa Pihan, and someone else who did not hear that they retracted went and acted on their original ruling. Rabbi Shimon Batur, Rabbi Shimon's Batur. Rabbi Elazar Safek, Rabbi Elazar says Safek, we're not sure. Why? Good question. Ezu safek. What's the safek he's talking about? Yashav lo b'toch beito hayav. If he stayed at home, yani he's local, then he's hayav a korban because he should have known about the retraction. Halachim getziyam batur. If he traveled, then he agrees he's batur because he doesn't know. You know, really, the guy who's traveling should also be batur versus hayav. Amar la ben Azai told him, what's the difference in this guy who's staying locally? Sheyashiv b'tov shaya l'shmo sheyishma. He said, why? Because the guy saying locally should have heard. And this guy who traveled did not hear. Okay. If Bedin did not try to change a slight ruling, but rather try to uproot an entire mitzvah, for example, Amru en nida b'Torah, there's no such thing as hilchot nida in the Torah. Or en Shabbat b'Torah, no Shabbat in the Torah. Or in Avodah Zarah, there's no such thing as Avodah Zarah in the Torah. How to between your patur from bringing a korban because it has to be a slight halacha, but not the entire halacha. They try to abolish part of the mitzvah and to retain part of the mitzvah. That's the case. Kesad, like what? Amru yesh nida b'Torah. They said, there is such a thing as nida. But if someone's with a woman who's watching the clean day versus a tameh day, is patur, right? So that's talking about a case in according to Doraita at least, if she's a ziva, if she has an unusual flow, then during those days she's tame'a only the amount of days that she was bleeding for. But he has to watch X amount of days, the amount of days that she was bleeding for. So if they say, no such thing as that, you're patur if you're with her during those days, that is a partial abolishment of the halachot because you're not abolishing completely the halachot of nidab, just a part of it. Yes, Shabbat Batur. There is such a thing as Shabbat. But if you carry from private to public, you're Batur. Yes, Avodah Chachamim Batur. Such a thing as Avodah Zarah in the Torah. But if you're better than Avodah Zarah, you're Batur. In these cases are chayav for a korban. Why? The matter was forgotten. The matter was hidden. Only a matter, which means a detail, was what that they made a mistake on, but not the entire halacha. You can't uproot an entire halacha from Torah. Marder Shmuel. My time Rabbi Shimon. What's Rabbi Shimon's reasoning? That your patur, if the guy, even if Betin retracted. Mar says because Ho'il Ubeshut Betin who also he did it with Betin's permission. He didn't know about the retraction. Patur. Ikadam version Mar Rabbi Shmuel Amarav. Homer had Rabbi Shimon used to say, Kol Rashi et Abirav Sibur, any ruling that spread throughout the majority of Bnei Israel. Yahid Hausel Tapatur. If one person does it, it's Patur, even if Betin reversed themselves. Because a ruling is only given to differentiate between someone who did something on purpose or by mistake. And therefore, if he did something by mistake because of Betin, you Patur. Let's say I have a question regarding money used for the animal to bring for a korban for a palm davar, the korban brought for what Bedin has to make because of their mistaken ruling, or a goat brought for someone who uh, if Bedin made a mistake regarding Avodah Zarah ruling. But initially they used to collect from Bnei Israel. The Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Meir says, "Metrumat lishkahin b'gikbein." That comes from the temple, the Bet HaMikdash treasury, not from Bnei Israel directly. Now the question according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that a person is patur even if he relied on Betin, even if Betin retracted. Kevin the Gavel Hoda. So one second, according to Rabbi Shimon, if Bnei Israel's giving in a collection, after Betin retracted. So how would he not know? How was it a mistake still? The mark says either one answer. If you want to check out Stam, they collected money without telling you what it's for. That's why they didn't know. Second answer, more plausible. Ibadema, Kigon Shalo have meta. He wasn't in town when they collected. Idema, third answer. Rav Ki Ida Tana Rav held the other Tana, Tana Ibcha, who held the Breta the opposite way. But Hila Govin Lahen, initially we say that according to Rabbi held that we collect from Bnei Israel. Rabbi Shimon says, Mitrumat Alishka Himbayin, they collect from the Bet Midrash, and that's how the guy didn't know. Okay. Tani, for instance, says, Rabbi Meir says, Yachayab for a personal hatat, if you ruled on Bedin, and Betin retracted. Rabbi Shimon Patur, Rabbi Shimon Patur. Rabbi Elazar Amar Safek, Rabbi Elazar Safek, Mishum Simchus Amr Tlu, and Simchus also says it's not sure. Now, Mabri Yochanan, Asham Tlu Ikbana, what's the difference between Rabbi Elazar and Simchus? They're both saying they're not sure. The difference is in regarding to an Asham Talui. An Asham Talui is regarding to a korban that's brought out of Safek. And it's um, but it's not a regular Safek. It's talking about a case where it's a high chance the guy sinned. However, in that case, if that was the case of Betin, Sumchus would say that um, he does not bring the Korban. Okay. Amar Rabbi Zira Abira says, Mashal the Rabbi Lazar, the man of Rabbi Harbi give an analogy of what Rabbi Lazar holds. And Dam Shachal Safek Halif Shvek Shuman, it's like a person who ate a piece of fat that we're not sure if it's Isur Chalev or Mutar fat. Vinadalo, then actually became aware, Shemavi Asham, and then he brings in Asham Talui for Kapara. So we see that he has to bring in Hashem Dalut to forgive his sin. Okay. V'lo mibar leman damar tzibur martin. This does not need to be said according to the opinion that uh, Bnei Israel brings the korban because the Mefarsim ilta, because then if Bedin retracted and they ever had to bring a korban, then it's well known. Ela afilu man damar betik. Meaning, even according to has that only Bedin brings. Even with people, even though it's not public knowledge, he's still chayav. You have a shayla because he should have asked. Have Amrin, then people would have told him that Bedin retracted, and he wouldn't have gotten into the problem. Amar said, Ravin says, Beitim Rabbi Yosef, different opinion. Mashal, the Mesumchos. How do we explain the Mesumchos' opinion? The Mother Mar was the comparable. Adam Shavi, someone brings a kapara, a korban rather, during Ben Hashot, in between night and day. So if it's, we're not sure if it was from the day before, which would have been kapara, which would have been a good korban. So maybe it was at nighttime, and it's too late to bring a korban, and therefore it would not work. In that case, he does not bring a sham talui. So too over here as well. In our case of Bedin, where we're not sure because of their attraction, he does not bring a korban. Not according to, this does not need to be said according to opinion that Bedin does not bring, Bedin's bringing it because Pashut, because he doesn't know about Bedin bringing it. Even according to opinions that Bnei Israel is bringing it. Even in that case, in Vasimilta, where it is publicized, people that were told him had he asked that Bedin attracted. Over here, it's like the case of the guy who brought his korban during the twilight, and therefore it's not sure because not who says he would have found someone that would have told him the correct answer, meaning who says that it was up to him to find out because why would he ask just because Batin is bringing a korban? That's not a reason enough for him to understand, or that person may not have known why Batin is bringing the korban. Okay. Amalo ben Azza said to Rabbi Akiva, Maishna ben Yosef, right? Which means what's the difference between the guy who's staying locally or not locally or traveling overseas? Shapir Kamar Rabbi Akiva ben Azza. Now the problem is we said that Rabbi Akiva said, if the guy's local, he should have asked and he should have found out. The guy's traveling. He's a patur because he couldn't have found out. Now the Quran says Rabbi Akiva has a good point. What would Ben Azai argue with that? Amar Baba says, "Hezik b'derech ikbena." The difference is in Tomar a case where the guy already set out. The Ben Azai, according to opinion, Ben Azai, Hayab is Hayab. They have a better ita because he's still home, even though he's not out yet. Even though he's traveling, he didn't leave yet. He's still local. The Rabbi Akiva is better because he's already starting to travel. Okay, so he's on the on the way to the airport, for example. Okay. Hello, Batin, Shila Akor Kol. I go to the next part. Mishnah says that if you're uprooting the entire halacha, the entire mitzvah, you're patur, because it's not what the Torah is talking about. It's talking about a case only of a partial removal. Kumaran. Beinam Davar Pasul says that you have to the a small detail of the mitzvah comes obscured. Below Shiakira Mitzvah not talking about a case where the entire mitzvah comes uprooted. Can't say what's the case, right? We're basically doing verbatim of the Mishnah. Amru in Minida Batura, in Shabbat Batura, in Avim Batura, Yachol Yochayvin Damadamar, Beinam Davar, Lo Shtalim Mitzvah Kula Putrin. Right? Not that we completely uprooting a mitzvah, but rather only a partial mitzvah. It says there is nida of Abba Mishmerti Avam Keneged Yom Patur that be with that woman who's in those days it's considered patur. Yes, Shabbat Patur, there is Shabbat. Avam Muzim Mishudei Yachim Mishudei Patur, someone that carries from private to public is patur. Yes, Shabbat Patur, there is Avda Zra, but Avam Mishtachal Patur, if bad an idol patur. Yeah, Chol Patur, maybe my thing to be patur. Tamulamar Venem Davar V'lo Kol Aguf. No, since it's a minor detail that's forgotten, you are chayav the Paran Davar. That is the case of Paran Davar. And one more. Yachol Putrin. The Gemara says, one second. You would have thought they're patur. The mitzvah betul mitzvah paturin. Now, if we just established that the entire mitzvah is patur, and now you're bringing examples of cases where it's a partial mitzvah you're patur, what would be a case of hayav? The says, no, Tana hachi kakashle. This is what the Tanya is asking. He's asking and answering it in form. Ema davar. Maybe we should say, you know what? The matter, the davar, the word, and the obscurity of the details. Kula mitmish mashma. Maybe it's referring to the entire mitzvah the Torah is saying. Therefore, the Torah says, "V'nei elam davar," a matter, which only a partial detail. My mashma, how does that mashma that? Ma'ula kareba v'ne'elam mid davar. We read it as if it says some of it became removed. Hezkiah Amar given explanation. Amar Krav Asu ve'asu ahat mikol mitzvot v'lo kol mitzvot. It sounds like since it says if a person if they transgress any of the mitzvot from all the mitzvot, it means like a partial but not all. The Bar says 1 second mitzvot tarti mashma. You just brought them not such a great proof seemingly because you just sound like they have to make two mitzvot plural. The Bar says no. Amar Nachman Bar Yitzhak mitzvat ktiv. True. But it's written as misvat without two vavs. One vav teach you singular. Okay, Marashi Amar says different explanation. Yalif davar mizakim mamre. We learn Zeh Shrav mizakim mamre. The guy the Tamir Hacham who rules erroneously and Betin shoots him down and he goes back and does it again, he gets executed. The Tiveh mizakim mamre. Over there, Pasuk says, Ki yipalim mecha davar lo tismin davar hashay agidu lecha yamin usmol. Don't move an iota right or left. Don't deviate from what Hashem says. Ma mamre min davar v'lo kol davar af b'vara davar lo kol aguf. So it's over here as well. Just like over there was a partial halacha, so it's over here a partial halacha. Marvi damar Shmuel in betin hayavim betin zan hayav for a problem davar. Ad she'eru b'davar she'en hazutukim modim unless they are ruling about halacha that the tzedukim do not agree. Meaning it's something that's in like Torah Shabbat Pele, Gemara. Right, so the Tzedukim were these people who owned the Torah Shabbat. They were very literal. Torah said the tefillin has to be ben einecha. They would literally put their tefillin between their eyebrows. So the this is only if Bedin makes that type of mistake on those type of mitzvot, that is when they bring a korban. But if it's a matter that the Tzedukim agree with, yani Torah Shebechtav, simple Chumash stuff, Peturin their patur. Why? My tama zil Ravu. This is a case they should have known. This is the obvious of the obvious. Go read it in school, basically. That even children know this halachot from the Torah. Tanah Mishnah says, Yesh Torah aval haba shemeret yom keneged yom patur. So the first case of the Mishnah, we see that we brought the case in Nidav. Gemara says, Alamai, why in that case should we chayav shemeret yom keneged yom haktiva? It says it in the pasuk. So it should be like a case of pashut peshat of a chumash, and you should be patur. Pasuk says, "B'safer Allah." She counts for each day. Boom. The Quran says no. The Amrei Hara'ad Shalei no. Maybe the Torah it wasn't that halacha. The court maybe said, but maybe said that it's mutar to be with a woman a partial relations, not complete inside, but partially. Gemara biyahu da asira, and only you can't just finish. You can't finish the intercourse, which obviously they're both asur. Which is impossible. Hanamik Pasuk says, Et Mikora He'ara. Even the Tzedukim would agree that partial relations are asur. Gemara says, no. The Amri Kedarka Asira. No, the Betin ruled that natural relations with a woman are asur. Shelo kedar kashaya, maybe unnatural relations are mutar. Uh, Maybe that would be mutar because it's not natural. Gemara says "Haktiva meshkeva isha." The pasuk says any type of relations with women that's asur. Gemara says, "Okay, fine. Amar degerak asur afilu kara." Maybe they said, you know what, natural, even the initial relations are asur. B'shlo kedarka, but the unnatural relations, Gemara bi'ahu asur. Maybe you can't have complete relations, but maybe you could have initial. And all of a sudden, everybody woke up. Horayot, welcome to Horayot, right? The Gemara says that's not true because if that's the case, even in the case of the nida, you would be chayav a kurban. Meaning, if Betin said that the only mistake they would be making would be talking about a case of unnatural relations, initial relations, then that Bedin could have just wrote that. We could have just mentioned that in the beginning, the unnatural relations. Gemara says no. Case regular relations. The pasuk is talking about a case, and we're talking about a case that Bedin would make a mistake, where they would say its initial relations are asur in regarding to a woman with a regular nida, and not a case of ziva. Okay, maybe that's a different answer. The amre zava lo have ela be'ameh. Bedin would say only chiyav and zava if it, only for the cycle that happens during daytime. Ditiv kol yemeh zova. Because pasuk says all the days of overflow. Maybe nighttime would be pasul. That happened nighttime wouldn't count, and that's why that would be a case of where the Gemara says even nighttime counts, and Bedin would make a mistake on that. That would be the bubu. Okay, Tam. Yes, Shabbat Matura v'motzim Meshuti Patur. The Gemara says next case of Mishnah was Shabbat. If the Bedin says no such thing as carrying, no problem carrying from private to public. The Gemara says that might. Why is that considered Hayab? This is the Kim would agree because Pasuk says openly, Lo totziu masa b'metadechem. You do not carry on Shabbat. Boom. Simple in the Torah. It says the Amri hotza'ahu asur. Hachanasam mutar. Maybe no. Betim would say only carrying out asur, but bringing in mutar. You would have an answer. The Amri hotza'ah v'hachansahu asira. Mishud v'yadorek. Maybe the Betim would say you can't carry or bring in, but you can hand or throw it over. Okay, those would be the cases that you would be chayav. Now, third case. Yesh awdachem b'torah ava mishtachah b'tor. We said the third case in Mishnah would be a chayav of a korban would be if Bedin agrees that there's avodah zarah, but you're allowed to bow down. The Gemara says about shelo kedar kashaya, but if it's not the natural manner of the avodah zarah, it's mutar. Sorry, I skipped a few lines. Tamai, how come it's mutar? How come you're chayav? The pasuk says clearly in the Torah, don't bow down to idols. Tichtiv lo tishtachave le'el acher. You can't get better than that. Gemara says, you know what? The Amri ki asira tishtachave kedarka v'shlo kedarka l'shaya. Maybe Betim would say it's asur to bow down to it only when it's the normal way to bow down to it. Right? We know there's a lot of other avodah zarahs like Markulis we had in Masech avodah zarah. Baal Peor. Markulis used to throw stones at it. Baal Peor used to worship it by defecating on it. I kid you not. You did not hear me wrong. Maybe you might think that you're allowed to bow down to those avodah zarahs. Mashallah, no, even those you can't. And therefore, if Bedin says you're allowed to, they get punished. Even if they didn't answer the Amre Shahava Gufa Kedarkahu, that's maybe, Bedin will say even bowing down to us, or even if it's normal. The Idba Bashut Yadayim V'Raglayim, maybe only if you're spreading out completely the hands and feet. Maybe bowing down without bowing down completely with your hands and feet would be mutar. Therefore, we say in that case, question, what if Bedin says there's no such thing as plowing on Shabbat? What's the halacha? Mahu. Me and Ren, do we say Kevin the Kamodi Kul Milta? Maybe since they agree that there's a melachot of Shabbat, there's 38 other melachot, but they're only denying one of them. Kibitum mitzat v'kiyum mitzadam is that considered a partial denial and retaining the rest, and therefore you bechayav a korban. Odilma Kevin the Ka'akran, and then the harsha kolikar, since you're uprooting a complete portion of harisha of plowing, ki akrat guf to me. Therefore, we considered uprooting a full mitzvah, and you would be patur. Hashem's bringing a proof. Yes, Nidam Patur, Abba, Shmur Yom Kineged Yom Patur. We'll bring a proof from the case of Nida in our Mishnah, seemingly from the case of the woman. Why would be chayav? It sounds like you approved a mitzvah completely. So seemingly that would be the same concept, and therefore the same way you be chayav over there, you also be chayav by the case of charisha, plowing. We said no. Especially the case of the woman we already explained elsewhere earlier that's a special case of Betin with initial relations. Okay, Tashma next proof. Yes, Shabbat Batura was the case of Shabbat. Aval Mosif and Shusha Yachid Shusha bin Batur. That my Ha'akrin knows Akol Yikar seemingly uprooted the whole halacha of carrying. Mashatam Namik Tichim. We also answered that case where it's talking about handing over or throwing. Tashma next proof. Yesh Shabbat bin Batura. There is Avodah Zara. Al Meshacheh Batur Batur bowed down. Ba my Wire Chayav. Ba'akrin Shahavei Akol Yikar. But they uprooted bowing down. The Gemara says Hav Mreish Tahavei Namik. We also answered bowing down earlier. So we didn't answer whether or not the case of plowing would be a complete uprootal and therefore no korban, or a partial uprootal and yes korban. Rabbi Zera has a question. En Shabbat b'shvi'id ma'o. What if they say there's no such thing as a Shabbat during Shemitah year? B'maita, what's the mistake? B'hadan kira, assuming they made a mistake in the Torah. B'harish ubakasir tishbot. You should stop plowing and let your plowing and your utensils rest. Bezman de ika harisha ika Shabbat. Sounds like maybe the word Shabbat over there is connected to plowing. Since like maybe during the 6 years when you're able to plow, you have to keep Shabbat. Maybe if there's no plowing, like Shemitah, there is no Shabbat. So the Gemara says, "Me and do we say since they keep the Shabbat during the other years of the seven that considered like a partial abolishment, and you be chayav, or maybe since they're uprooting Shemitah completely, Shabbat from Shemitah completely, that means considered a complete uprootal." We see that Navi prophesizes to uproot something from Torah chayav mita, right? Even if it's a real Navi, but he's prophesying something against Torah. The Betul makes sense to keep however, if he's trying to prophesize to nullify a partial and retain the rest, Rabbi Shimon patur. Rabbi Shimon is a patur from dying. But even if he says worship today and nullify that tomorrow, chayav death penalty. Obviously, from here in Shabbat b'Shvit, we see that the case of Shabbat during Shemitah, ki bitul mitzvah v'kiyum mitzvah dami is considered a partial nullification and a partial keeping, and Shema Mina would be considered chayav of a korban. Amen.